Welcome back to our final week. I'm so glad that you have stuck it out and that you're joining us for our 12th video going through this wonderful book, Good and Beautiful Life. I hope that this has been an encouraging and fruitful time for you. I hope that you've been able to practice some of these disciplines, not in a legalistic way, feeling like you have to do them in order to be a good Christian, but again, and what we're going to be exploring in this video, in this last one, is the reality that it's all about relationship. It's about relationship with Jesus. And so all of these are just simply tools. They are aids to help foster and encourage and help that relationship with Jesus flourish. But the goal is always relationship. And so the false narrative that we have for this week, there's actually two. And that is the two false narratives that confuse us and cause us to see these spiritual disciplines, these practices, these apprenticeship practices in unhealthy ways. So the first false narrative is that what truly matters is faith in Jesus, not having an ongoing relationship with him. That can seem a little strange because obviously faith in Jesus is a key component to Christianity, and certainly something that in the Reformed tradition, our faith in Jesus is everything. But the key is we cannot have faith in Jesus and remove a relationship with him. Those two go hand in hand. In order to have faith in Jesus, it flows naturally into having a relationship with him. And so when we try and have just faith in Jesus without actually having a relationship with him, what happens is our understanding of spiritual disciplines, our understanding of these apprenticeship practices, they become kind of meaningless. There's no real necessary reason to have them. They are of no benefit to us if all we need is faith in Jesus without actually having to be in relationship with him. That's the first false narrative. The second false narrative is that the only way to be a good Christian is to keep all the rules. This is what we call legalism. And spiritual disciplines then, or apprenticeship practices, become mandatory. That in order to be a good Christian, you have to do all of these things. And so we can fall into one of these two patterns, either seeing them as not necessary for our life, we don't need them in order to have faith in Jesus, or they become so legalistic that if we're not practicing them, then that means we don't have faith in Jesus. And both of these false narratives miss the key component, and that is a relationship with Jesus. These disciplines are not mandatory, but they help us. They are for our benefit because they help us engage with Jesus in different ways. They help us embody the scriptures. They help us make scripture part of who we are, so that as we journey along in life, we always have them ready with us in written form, but also in the embodied practices. And so James Bryan Smith says this. He says, apprentices of Jesus learn how to be with Jesus in order to become like Jesus. And that is done by learning how to abide in him. I absolutely love that. And that sense of abiding comes from our passage, John 15, verses 5 through 8, which says, I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. If you do not remain in me, you are like a branch that is thrown away and withers. Such branches are picked up and thrown into the fire and burned. If you remain in me and my words remain in you, ask whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. This is to my Father's glory, that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples. So how do we abide in Jesus? Well, really, to abide in him means to rest and to rely on Jesus. To rest and rely on him. And so that means that Jesus is not simply outside of us, looking down upon us and judging us for all the little screw-ups that we have. He is very much within us. He is journeying alongside of us. He is with us through everything. And every opportunity is an opportunity to rely and to rest on him and in him. To abide means spending time with Jesus, investing in that relationship, fostering it, allowing it to flourish, to deepen, to allow our roots to go deep down into the reality of who Jesus is and the reality of Jesus in our lives. And so, as I said at the beginning, this entire series has all been for the purpose of fostering and flourishing this relationship with Jesus. I pray that you've not encountered this, but I recognize it as a very deep temptation, and that is to make all of these practices more or less than they are actually meant to be. And that is to fall into one of those first two false narratives, to see them as completely useless and not helpful for us at all, because all that matters is faith in Jesus, and thus separating an actual relationship with him. Or we make it all about needing to practice these practices in order to be a good Christian. But ultimately, if that's all it becomes, then it's just a checklist. We just practice it so we can check it off, say, okay, I've done my piece, but neither which actually get at the heart of what they're supposed to be for, and that is being in relationship with Jesus. And so the practice that we have for this week, I hope, becomes one that perhaps encompasses all of our practices, or at least becomes one of the main ones that we walk away with, and that is to live a day devotionally. Now, many of us have probably grown up with the idea of daily devotions, and maybe we already have a rhythm set in place where we wake up in the morning, we set some time aside to pray, to read our Bible, maybe to work through a devotional book. Those are great rhythms to have, and I know have provided a lot of life for a lot of Christians, including myself. But living a day devotionally taps into the tradition of the monastic life, where they would have moments throughout the day where they turn their attention to God. And it's not a legalistic thing. It is not in order to become a righteous person. It is simply allowing the presence of God to become the forefront of our minds throughout the entire day. And so this practice actually starts the night before you're going to practice it. You're going to need to go to bed at a decent time, because the better rested we are, the more attentive we will be throughout the day. And so it might mean you need to go to bed around 10 o'clock. I'm just throwing that out there as a guideline. Again, this is not the rule. You have to find whatever works for you and your schedule. But what I would encourage us to do is to wake up in the morning and set a good chunk of time aside. James Bryan Smith suggests 30 minutes. I recognize that may not be possible. You may need to start with something like 15 and work your way toward 30 minutes. But you want a good chunk of time where you know you're not going to have to feel rushed to spend this time, but to wake up and to engage in prayer. To recognize today we'll have a bunch of worries. You might wake up already thinking of all the different things that have to happen, all the different tasks that you have, and this is an opportunity to welcome God into that, to welcome God into the day, to welcome him into this list of tasks and chores and all the different things that we seem to value so much and see as very important. And it is an invitation for God to enter into that, to welcome him into it, and to surrender it all to God, to say, God, this is what I perceive as needing to be done. I give it to you. Whatever gets done, I want to do for your glory. Anything that does not get done, I entrust to you that it will get done at another point, or that it's not important enough to get done at this point in my life. Take some time. And maybe that prayer is simply you sitting in silence, in solitude, sitting in your living room, or on your knees by your bed, whatever works for you. Perhaps that sounds horrible to you, and so maybe it looks like going for a walk. First thing in the morning, just get up, get out of the house, and go for a walk. I know some pastors who they try and stick with this, and again, it's not legalistic, but they will go for a long walk, and the entire way there to wherever their turning point is, they walk in silence, and they start with a prayer and they just say, God, I'm giving you this time, speak what you will. When they reach the turning point and they return, they then lift up their own prayers, their own concerns to God. Some pastors practice this, and often they say neither God or themselves stick to their dedicated time slot. Sometimes in that walking, you just end up lifting up prayers in the beginning and you end up listening to God speaking in the second. That's That's absolutely fine. But have a time where you can spend that time relationally with God. And then as you go about your day, pinpoint certain markers. And maybe these are certain hours that you set aside in your day. Maybe you set an alarm on your phone or an alarm clock to go off, so that when this alarm goes off, you engage in some prayer. And 5 to 10 minutes may be all you need, but you engage in it just to welcome God into that particular moment in your day. And whatever you're dealing with at that point, you submit it to God. You surrender it to God. You welcome him again, just like in the beginning of your day. You welcome him into that moment. You surrender it to him and allow him to partake and be a participant in that space. At some point throughout this day, you also want to spend some time in Scripture. And this can look different. You could just dedicate a certain block of time. Maybe it's after your workday and you come home and you just want to decompress. Instead of turning on the TV, instead of opening up a book or flipping through social media, you just spend some time in Scripture. And it doesn't have to be a big chunk of Scripture. It can just be a couple of verses. And just take your time with just a couple of verses and sit with them and seek God's illumination, seek God's revelation as he's revealing himself through those passages. Or another option might be that you have the Scripture with you throughout the day, and every time that you break for those moments of prayer, maybe you choose to set it off at lunchtime, so that when you have your lunch, you have that time of prayer. Maybe you have another break at your coffee break, or you do it during your commute to and from work. All these different moments that are already rhythms in your life, you can break for prayer, and perhaps you have a passage or two of Scripture on your phone, or you have an index card, and you write that passage at the beginning of the day, and you carry it with you throughout the day. So then that way you are constantly reading it, you're praying over it throughout your whole day. I find the Psalms are great for this. They are prayers of God's people, and so they work really well for practices like this, where we can read Scripture, where we can pray it over our lives and allow it to shape and form our day. Maybe it's working through Psalm 23 throughout the entire day. And so you take chunks of the Psalm throughout the day. And I just say Psalm 23 because it's one that's fairly well known. Maybe you already have it memorized. And so you don't need to have it on an index card or on your phone. You already have it in your mind. Those are great places to start. Another challenge would be to memorize Scripture throughout the day. Either way, make Scripture part of your day so that you can allow it to become not just part of your day, but part of who you are. And you allow God to speak to you through that discipline throughout the day. And the last portion of living a daily devotional life is to end your day with the discipline of the examine. This is an ancient discipline, the examine, and that is simply you find yourself just before going to bed, maybe sitting up in bed, maybe sitting on the edge, maybe kneeling, whatever you find comfortable, and you imagine what has happened recently. And maybe so you think back, I just got ready for bed. Before that, I did the dishes. Before that, I ate supper. Before that, and you just go all throughout the day in reverse. Whatever happened most recently, all the way to the very beginning of the day. And you examine what happened that day. And everything that happens, you give thanks to God for it. You thank him and you glorify God for that moment. And you point out the moments where God provided for you. And you give thanks to God for that. You point out the moments where you see God. God, I saw you working in this. And you give God praise for that. Not only does this help you examine all the areas that God has been acting and working and revealing himself in your life, but it also allows us to practice the discipline of gratitude by recognizing and identifying all the ways that God has provided for us and shaped us and revealed himself to us. All of these different things, they just allow our hearts to become so full of thanks and praise and joy. And we just want to thank God for that just before the end of the day. And when you're done, you go to sleep, entrusting the evening to God. And if you really want, you wake up and you practice it again. Again, this is not a legalistic thing. This is a discipline that is supposed to help foster that relationship with God. To be able to see God throughout your day, to include Him throughout your day. So it's not just it's not just a relationship we have on Sundays, or it's not just a relationship we have with God at the beginning of our day, but it is a way of incorporating God into our entire lives, including Him on the journey that we have. That way we don't become so isolated and so self-focused that it becomes, oh, I'm going to make time for God, but instead it is God is already present in our lives, and we are switching the gear to how is it that we are becoming attentive to where God is in our lives already, and inviting us into what God is doing in and amongst our lives. It becomes much more relational when it's that than the alternative of just I'm going to carve out time for God. Anyways, I hope that is a fruitful time. I would love to hear about your experiences throughout this entire journey. And so if you want to leave a comment down below, I would encourage you to like and subscribe if you want more content like this. And I pray that you have a blessed time meeting with the Father, communing with the Creator, and that your relationship with Him deepens every day. Take care, and God bless.